Hi, my name is Mitch Mitchell. I'm president of TT Mitchell Consulting Incorporated, and today I'm speaking with my buddy Jesan Sorrells, owner and principal conflict engagement consultant for human services consulting and training. Let him say hi.
Hi, folks. How you doing today? Jesan Sorrells, Human Services Consulting and Training, based out of Binghamton, New York.
See, he said that better than me, but that's okay. He's used to saying it. So anyway,
that's what happens when you host a podcast.
Yeah, I know. Well, you got that radio voice. You and Kelvin. I think you met Kelvin once. Y'all got that radio voice. I'm just me. I was the musician in the group. That's all we got. But
we all need vocalists.
Yes, we do. But I'm going to start this off because I usually like to start with something that's a little bit different, and so that's what I'm going to do by asking you. Tell me about the art stuff. You were a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Art. I said, what? What?
All right, so here's the story. Here's the story, Morning Glory, as you said back in the 90s with Oasis, around the art. And by the way, you're probably the first person professionally who's really asked me about that. My artistic practice was really developed and really started building when I was probably around 12 years old. And I came to art through collecting comic books and following comic book artists. And so I was really into superheroes and fascinated by all of that. And this was in the early to mid 90s before you had the era of comic book movies that are like huge, giant blockbusters, like the world that we live in now of Avengers and Superman versus Batman versus Wonder Woman versus everybody. That world was a dream, and a dream over there. I remember being really, really excited about the first Batman film with Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton, directed by Tim Burton. Loved that movie. Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? I love that line. So I came to art through comics, and I came to art the hard way. I owned my own comic book company, and I did some self-publishing, not anything that you've ever heard of. It was Zero Comics back in the day. And this was, again, before internet and all that, and before you could scale at a digital level. So I really got into printing and publication and making ash cans and things like that. At a certain point, I hit a wall. And this was probably in 1998 or 1999. And I decided I've got to do something. I've got to make an artistic change. Well, just like most changes in my life, it took me 4 years to sort of work up the courage to finally make that change. And I ended up going to a small school, literally microscopic school with 5,000 students, but I'm going to give it a shout out because it's my alma mater, Bemidji State University in Bemidji, Minnesota, which is about 2 hours or so south and west of International Falls, which, yes, is the coldest place in the continental United States every single winter. And I went there, and in the midst of 12-foot drifts and snow coming in from North Dakota, I learned artistic practice. I was trained by people who were practicing artists. One of my mentors was a Russian printmaker, a wonderful woman named Natalia, who came over probably back in the 60s. And she basically told me the first time I walked into a drawing class, "You suck and you'll never be good." And I said, oh, that's how it's going to be. That's how we're going to play this game. Okay, so let's play the game. So I went in and I started learning everything I possibly could about art. Eventually, what ended up happening, just as in the arc of most things, as in the arc of conflict as well, which we're going to hopefully talk about a little bit today, I found my niche, and my niche was printmaking. I loved printmaking. Printmaking, for those of you who don't know out there, who are going to be watching this later on YouTube, you can go Google it, but the art of printmaking comes in many different ways. So you got lithography, you've got intaglio, you've got lino cuts, you got wood cuts, and it's a way of making beautiful images and remaking beautiful images in an era before Xerox and multi-tonal reproduction and reprographics and all those other kinds of processes that came along when the computer exploded onto the scene in the probably 70s and 80s. And even before photography. I mean, we were photographers before photographers were. And there are great printmakers out there. And old school artists, and by old school I mean pre-Pablo Picasso artists, used to understand how to make prints. And printmaking comes directly. There's a line that you can trace directly from Gutenberg and the printing press, all the way through printmaking and drawing, all the way right now down to graphic designers on the internet. And I was fascinated by all that. So I got my minor in printmaking, or my major in printmaking, actually my major emphasis in printmaking. And then I got my minor in a couple of different areas. I got a minor in art history, so I would at least understand the historical, socio-political, and economic and cultural processes that impact art. And I got some definite opinions around there. So if you ever want to find out what those are, you can ask me that on another hangout. But yeah, so I got a minor in art history, and then I got another minor in something called public history, which basically means the art and science of how to run a nonprofit, specifically an arts-based nonprofit. And I almost got a minor in chemistry. I was about a year away from having a minor in chemistry. And in 2008, I decided I had enough of Bemidji State University, and I'd had enough of being in college, and I was just about done. And I'd also shifted in my mindset away from being in the arts, not because the arts are hard. I won't say I don't think they are. They are hard. And they are incredibly difficult, and people that do that are incredibly talented. I had initially gone into art school because I wanted to get a degree in something where if I was going to pay for it out of pocket, I wouldn't feel ashamed looking at myself in the mirror the next day or 10 years afterward. And on the flip side of that, if I was going to have to take out a loan, I wouldn't feel ashamed at having to pay off a 6-figure loan for something that, I wasn't ever going to use. Like, I looked at business, or I looked at science, and I looked at all these things, and I've always been a reader and a bibliographer, and I love books, and I love libraries and reading, and the internet is like the greatest. Google's the greatest thing ever for me, because I can go for years and go, down the rabbit hole of that. But suffice it to say that those practices ended up informing me in conflict resolution, ended up informing me in all of my business practices, and how I even designed my website, how I visually look at the world, what I think of as valuable. The critical elements of art history helped me to be able to create judgments and critiques and build arguments and defend things, and defend my positions. And they also gave me a awesome, positive experience with creativity, which is incredibly needed when you talk about resolving conflicts that are really sticky between people, and when you talk about conflict resolution and conflict management as a leadership competency.
That's good. See, that's good stuff. See, now I can just say, so Jesan, tell me about your sister, and it'll go forever. So we can't have all that.
I got 3 sisters. Which one do you want to talk about?
Now, let me just say this. You talked about being close to International Falls, coldest place. I lived in Limestone, Maine for 4.5 years. Had to be number 2 as far as cold. I went to Oswego State, number 1 as far as snow. And so I can compete a little bit with you. I know exactly where you're coming from. But then you did something that I didn't. Because I left Maine and came to Central New York. You left Minnesota and you went to Texas. Mm-hmm. What the devil?
Well, let me tell you the Texas story. So here's how the master's degree sort of works. I did indeed go to Texas. But at the time I was going to Texas, I was working full-time at the University of Minnesota. And I got my master's degree in conflict resolution and reconciliation. And I was sparked by a man named Julius Erlin, who currently I think is working in England. And I don't know if he's still doing conflict stuff. But he came by and he actually did a training that I attended with a number of other residence directors. And at the time I was a residence director. And in essence, what that means for those of you who either attended college and paid attention to your RA or didn't attend college and have no idea what I'm saying, means that I was the king of the resident assistants. I was the person that if you as a student lived in my residence hall, you were intoxicated one Friday afternoon or one Friday evening or several Friday evenings, and you wound up in the hallway, and my resident assistant, my employee, would find you. They'd pick you up, dust you off, make sure you got back to your room, and then the next day you would come and talk to me. And I would hand out sanctions. I would have meaningful developmental conversations with 18-year-olds about their life choices and sort of guide them through the process of being a first-year student. And I did that at the University of Minnesota for 3 years. During that 3-year process, I wound up going to a lot of in-services. And one of those in-services was focused around conflict resolution and mediation skills. And I took this thing called a conflict styles inventory, which I still use today with groups. And it examined what my conflict style is, what my conflict communication style is, my preferred style. And it did a lot of different things for me. And it sort of opened up my eyes to this idea that there's a way to resolve conflicts that's appropriate and inappropriate. There's also a way to manage yourself, and you don't have to pick or choose one path or another. Sometimes you could pick all of them. Sometimes you could pick none of them. You have options. And Julius and his work actually sort of opened my eyes. And so I started searching around and looking for master's programs in conflict resolution. At the time at the University of Minnesota, I could have stayed on campus and gotten not a master's in conflict resolution, but I could have gone into a master's in public administration program, which also fascinated me at the time, with an emphasis in conflict resolution. Or I could have gone down the road to Hamlin and gotten a law degree with an emphasis in conflict resolution, and really stayed at the University of Minnesota very comfortably ensconced and not really have had to challenge myself to step out of my own comfort zone. But I didn't want to do that. So I started looking around at other colleges and universities across the country that have conflict resolution programs. I looked at Pepperdine out in California. I also looked at Southern Methodist University, which has an excellent program down in Dallas. I looked at Creighton University in the Midwest, and the Werner Institute out at Creighton in Nebraska. And then I also looked at NYU's program with an emphasis in conflict resolution. None of those seemed to fit. And primarily it didn't seem to fit because at the time I was working a full-time job. I was getting a salary. I didn't want to give up the money. So I'm like, how do I get a degree and not give up the money? And at the time, Abilene Christian University was one of 2 conflict resolution programs that actually had an online program. They were finally stepping into the online world, but they were doing it in a different kind of way than most online programs. So the material, the sort of webinar-based, reading material, research-based stuff was all online, but the in-person stuff, the game theory, the actual in-person one-on-one negotiation practices, role-playing, those kinds of things were all in person. And so we had residency sessions. We had a strong in-person component. I actually drove to Abilene, Texas from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I did that ride. Now on Google, listen, here's one of my things I will tell you for everybody watching out there. And if anybody who ever was in the state troopers and saw me zip by, statute of limitations is over. It says on Google Maps that it is 15 hours, I believe, from Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I was at the University of Minnesota campus, to the ACU campus in Abilene, Texas. I did that drive in 13 hours. That was the closest I could shave it.
Like you said, statute of limitations is over.
Statute of limitations is up.
Oh my goodness!
I can no longer be prosecuted.
Oh.
So I did this, and I did this about 3 to 4 times a year. I would go down to Abilene, and I had a great time. I met a ton of people from all over the country, and quite frankly, all over the world that were involved in the program. I met a woman Winona James, who was involved with the Department of Defense and the Air Force out in Colorado, and it was paid for her. Her employer reimbursed her for attending the program and being involved. And she was actually designing alternative dispute resolution systems for the equal opportunity portion of working with the Air Force and the Department of Defense out in Colorado. I met another woman, Leah Cagle. This is a shout out to Leah. She works and she has her own company, Georgia Mediation Professionals. It's a great company. Leah has a strong background in entrepreneurship and in real estate, and has a 20-year background of owning small businesses with her and her husband, and going through all the ups and downs that entrepreneurs go through, and had developed a real strong connection with judges and lawyers in the Georgia area, and came to conflict resolution out of a passion for peace, and a religious-based passion for peace, and to help people get to peace in their lives. My program was led by is led by Dr. Joey Cope and Dr. Gary Bailey, both of whom are great guys. Gary's definitely focused on, sort of the theory and the academician, but Dr. Cope, who I had on my podcast for season 2 of Your Bud You, which we'll hopefully talk about today, and you can go and download that on the website at www.hsconsultingandtraining.com /earbud u.
We were going to get to all that. Don't start selling
I had Dr. Cope on. And Dr. Cope has a strong background as a lawyer and as a conflict resolution professional and as a mediator. And so as I moved further and further into this process, I enjoyed Abilene. I enjoyed going to Abilene. I would stay for a week in Abilene. One of the most amazing things that I would see, I would stay at it was like the Holiday Inn or the Days Inn in Abilene. And I would leave, after, I'd leave, I'd go to do the work at the campus, interact with my cohort. I would come back to my hotel room, do whatever work it is I needed to do for the night, and then, hang out, watch TV, be on the internet, whatever. And one night I left my hotel room and I wound up going to a gas station, and I parked on the backside of the gas station. And when I got out of the gas station, there was this entire herd of stray cats that literally were just hanging out on the back of it's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. I've never seen this anywhere else in the country. They were hanging out in the back of the station, just meowing and running around and fighting and doing all the things that cats do that are wild. And when I pulled up, they didn't even blink. They just sort of parted. And then they went right back to what they were doing. And then I got what I needed to get from the gas station. I got back out of my car. None of them attacked me or anything. And then they just went back to doing whatever it was they were doing back behind the gas station. And they would literally move like a flock of seagulls just across the parking lot. I've never seen a herd of stray cats before. That's literally what it was, a herd of stray cats. So that's one of the many things that sticks with me about my experience with Abilene.
It just sounds like a horror movie waiting to happen.
Yeah, and the black dude dies first typically in those horror movies. Anyway, so yeah, I went there. Yeah, I went there.
Well, if you hadn't, I would have. So one more off-topic question, although it may not be off-topic.
Yeah.
Endicott.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are you originally from that area? Is that how you ended up back in the Endicott area, which is about an hour away from me, or what's the deal with that?
No. I wound up in Endicott because I left the University of Minnesota in 2011. I moved to Ithaca College because I got a position working with Ithaca College, the home of Cornell University and Ithaca College. And I was helping them set up and launch their first-year residential experience program. By that point, I had been a residence director for about 7 years, give or take. Actually, if you include undergrad experience, it'd been closer to 10 years. And I had hit my life cycle. There were a series of events and incidences, some of which I'd rather not get into, but there was a series of incidents that occurred in Ithaca, and it just, not anything negative or bad, just a series of incidences. And I decided, you know what? I'm done with the residence director experience. I can't sit across the table from an 18-year-old anymore and have empathy. I want to sit across the table from an 18-year-old that's thrown a football down a hallway and has broken a lampshade or has broken a light bulb and has done some damage. I want to shake the young man. It typically is a young man. I want to shake the young man. And so after having that experience, having that realization at 33, a sort of a parallel thing happened where I met my wife. And so my wife had 3 children, has 3 children, which are now my children, 10, 5, and one just turned 18, and he's getting ready to go to school. So actually it was really good that I didn't stay at Ithaca College. And it was just easier for me to pick up and move to Endicott than it was for her to pick up and move 3 children and everything. It just wasn't realistic. So I picked up and moved to Endicott. And what I tell people, and this is absolutely the truth, after almost a decade of higher education, where I got my master's degree and got my education and impacted a lot of lives and had a lot of different experiences, I wound up with a $754 check. And after I paid off all of my bills, I wound up with $50 in my pocket, and I moved to Endicott, New York, and I didn't know anybody.
There you go.
I knew nobody. And so I just started building my business, human services consulting and training, one step at a time, and literally by walking around talking to people and being sort of like a Socratic rabble rouser. So that's what I do now.
Good deal. And we'll just throw this in there, Mr. 4.0 Dean's List, all that other kind of stuff, Mr. Bonafides, educated guy, and I love that. I made Dean's List my senior year. That's the best I got.
I don't often talk about grades, but yes, I did attain a 4.0, and I was on the Dean's List several times. Anyway, that's irrelevant. What matters is,
wait. You know what? It can't be that irrelevant. It's on your LinkedIn page. That's all. You know, all I'm saying.
It is on my LinkedIn page. For those of you, if you want to connect with me on, LinkedIn, please connect with me on LinkedIn. But when you scroll all the way down, you will see that in the accomplishments section. That's right.
There. So you know, you pony that up there, put it out there. And by the way, every way that you can connect with Jesan will be lower after, you know, once this actually uploads to YouTube later on. Everything will be down below. So, and you know, I'll have a couple of things there too if you want to hook up with me. You know, I'll be nice. So, okay, let's get into it. Resolution.
All right.
What was it about conflict resolution that drew you to that?
I am fascinated by relationship. I'm fascinated by change. And primarily, I'm fascinated by relationship and change because I struggled in my life as a child with change. Between the ages of 12 and 20, I think I moved about 6 to 8 times all over the country because my mother was in the medical branch of the military, the CDC. And so after my parents got divorced when I was 12, we moved. And I lived in a number of different places. And so I saw the impermanence of permanence and the efficacy of change.
Hey,
and so that started.
Kid, you know, I know.
Yeah, there you go. And so that started working on my heart and on my mind. The other piece that attracted me to it is the interdisciplinary nature of conflict resolution, because so often, and I actually wrote a blog post, I've been writing a series of blog posts this week about sort of the key performance indicators, the metrics that workplaces can use in order to measure something that's undefinable, which is learning conflict resolution skills. Well, it's only undefinable because we've chosen to make it so. We've chosen to say, as individuals and as organizations, that there are only 3 ways to respond to a conflict. You either attack and you drive the other person out, and you can attack either overtly and directly or passive aggressively, but either way, those are forms of attack. So you can attack, you can accommodate, which means you go along to get along, kind of the teddy bear. Oh, hey, let's smooth everything over. Let's bring some cookies. You know, you can do that. Or the other acceptable way is avoidance. And so whenever I do a workshop, I ask how many people here, if they see a conflict, they run in the opposite direction. And literally 90% of the room raises their hand. The majority of people are conflict avoiders. And they're conflict avoiders because they believe something that is inherently wrong. And I actually have tweeted this out before, and I'll continue to tweet it out. Conflict in and of itself is not inherently negative. It's not. What we bring to conflict can either be positive or negative, but conflict in and of itself is not inherently negative. And this is a real tough idea for people who have engaged in one of those 3 areas, attack, avoidance, or accommodation, to accept. Because once you accept that idea that conflict in and of itself is not inherently negative, then the next thought that comes from that, and I was talking with a professional colleague of mine about this today, ironically enough, then you have to work on yourself. And nobody really deeply wants to work on themselves.
Yeah.
Because
now,
that requires.
I got to ask you this question from my perspective. Sure. I think you need to define what you think conflict is, because based on what you're kind of saying right now, if we're going to say that conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing, there's going to be a lot of folks who are going to say, well, yeah, it is. I think we need a better definition of how you're seeing it.
Well, the people that are going to say, yeah, it is, are looking at the results of conflict, not conflict itself. So the results of conflict can be negative. The results of conflict can be positive. All conflict is a process, and it's a change process. That's it. And like many processes, organizations, particularly at the organizational level where I work in workplaces, organizations try to systematize conflict out of the process because, well, for a whole variety of reasons, but the big one is that there's risk involved in conflict. There's a certain level of risk, particularly because of the nature of litigation and the litigation systems that we have set up in this country. So you can see this quite starkly in how other countries in the world deal internally in their organizations with conflict versus how we do it here in the United States. So here in the United States, if I hit Mitch's car with my car, regardless of who's at fault, we're both going to court. There's going to be a lawyer involved somewhere or two. There's going to be a legal process, and then we're all going to go home. Or maybe not. And one of us will, yeah, maybe not. And one of us will be either richer or poorer, depending. And actually, it won't even really be myself or Mitch. It'll be the lawyers that will be richer or poorer.
That's the truth.
And now I'm not knocking lawyers. There's room for litigation. I always have to say that. But the fact of the matter is that litigation is an aggressive, attack-based method of conflict resolution. That's really what it is. Versus mediation. So if I hit you in Australia, it costs, if my car hits your car in Australia, it costs me money to sue you. So it behooves me, and I might not, by the way, and I might not get to the law, I might not get to the actual court. So it behooves me, and it's codified into their law, it behooves me to go to mediation with you and figure out a way to figure this out and to do this without like getting lawyers involved. Now, in this country, we look at that and we say, well, that's a corrupt system, or how do people get justice? And that's a whole other aspect of conflict resolution that philosophically we also have to consider. What is justice? What is just? What is fair? What isn't? Who gets to decide that? And since it's so subjective, typically we throw our hands up and we say, okay, we'll just let the lawyers figure it out and the judges figure it out, and I don't want to think about it. Conflict resolution challenges that conclusion. And so the products of conflict can be negative. The products of conflict are poverty. The products of conflict are war. The products of conflict are dysfunctionality. When you have conflict in an organization, you have lower productivity, higher healthcare costs, higher stress, less revenue coming in. And of course, you open yourself up to risk through lawsuits and litigation for various things. Those are the results of conflict. But conflict in and of itself is, hey, Mitch, why don't you go get me that cup of coffee? No, screw you. I'm not going to get you that cup of coffee. That's a conflict. Okay, let's be real. That's a conflict. But we can figure out a way out of that process without using litigation. And so we hide behind saying the results of conflict are the conflict itself, so we don't have to look at conflict.
That's interesting. No, I like how you explain that, because I tied this in with leadership. Some folks, some of y'all know that I do leadership. You look at some of the videos here on this channel, you see I talk a lot of leadership, and I've written a couple of books on leadership. And you're right. There are a lot of people who are scared, even in leadership positions, to address this issue. I'm not one of those people. However, I've always kind of looked at it as one of those kind of things where, okay, I'm in the leadership position. I need to get this resolved. And most probably I'm bringing the two of you together, and we're going to have this conversation and let y'all kind of have it out. And if that doesn't resolve it, at least to the point where I've got some peace so we can get back to work, then I have to take that another step, which works just within my own department, but it may not work for the company overall. That's where you come in.
Correct. And the company overall has an established organizational culture. As a leadership consultant in this space, you know about holacracies, and you know about Zappos going through whatever it is that Zappos is going through right now.
That's one of the craziest principles. You know what? I keep reading about it, and I really have to admit I don't fully understand it, because he's still the guy in charge.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. He's still the one man at the top of the pyramid. There's still a pyramid. There's still a hierarchy. And I think, again, we're looking at the results, and we're looking at sort of the tangential things around not just conflict, but also organizational cultures and organizational hierarchies. And we're saying the things that surround those hierarchies are the problem, when in reality, the problem itself is hierarchy. And let's break this down even further. And I won't go too much into the neuroscience of conflict, but let me say this. Most conflicts are based on biological responses. And most of those biological responses are rooted in your amygdala and rooted in your fight-flight response. They are. They're fear-based responses. The reason why Mitch takes his two employees into a room and has them confront each other and has them have it out while he acts in essence as a mediator is because Mitch is, now I'm not putting this on Mitch, but I'm saying in this example, Mitch is afraid of X. Afraid of a loss of credibility, afraid of a loss of security, afraid of a loss of productivity. I'm afraid of the conflict spreading to other folks. All these things that maybe can't be identified or put into words, but Mitch knows what they are. And those are the things that are driving Mitch to resolve this conflict. But those fears don't match up with the fears of the two parties in the conflict. And the two parties are having their conflict because of their fears, a fear of a lack of trust, or fear of a lack of respect, or fear of a lack of power. And power is a big one, by the way. And I tie a lot of things into power. My master's thesis was about power and influence in mediation settings. So I'm fascinated by power and how people use it. And power is another thing where everybody knows what it is, kind of like air, but no one can really define it or put it in a box.
Or like electricity, as the guy says in The Secret.
Exactly. And so understanding not necessarily understanding why people do what they do and why people respond in the way that they do, understanding how to do, and this is the how part, how to do a deep dive into why they do what they do, and how to do it while focusing on emotional intelligence, which Daniel Goleman wrote about 30 years ago and is now experiencing a resurgence because neuroscience proves that emotional intelligence exists. Doing it with emotional intelligence, doing it with understanding, doing it with a desire to see people grow actually makes conflict resolution and the conflict management skills that I possess and that I give to organizations, it makes it a leadership competency, which is why I was glad to come on here because conflict resolution as a leadership competency is something something that's going to become more critical as things, and you can look at my Twitter feed to see this, as the singularity approaches and as more and more things become automated and as the wizards of smart give us the future that we want, which is more than just Tinder and swiping left or having another social media platform. It's really disassembling work from people, which is a much, much larger issue, but disassembling work from people, disassembling income from production. And as all these things sort of fade off into the ether, conflicts actually become more likely to happen, not less, because there will be more fear about a lack of security, not less, and thus less peace. Organizations, I believe, have a responsibility to maintain this as conflict resolution as a leadership competency and move this forward for the benefit of their workers and, quite frankly, overall society.
Yeah. Now, you know that I've talked, when you and I have talked, and I have said that I am of the opinion, and actually I got this number way back when I wrote the first book, and now I've never been able to find it again, but that's okay. I'll just keep putting it out there, that at least 85% of folks in leadership positions never got any leadership training and never led anything beforehand. So right off the bat, you're talking about companies needing to have this leadership competency, but they're not training leaders to begin with. They're basically
Correct.
putting people in these positions, assuming that they're going to know what to do. The people get there, they don't know what to do. They know how to do their job, but they don't know how to lead people. And they're scared to go ask anybody. Of course, conflict is going to happen. So you're right. It all becomes a big leadership thing with these companies. So when you go in, because there's some issue with, and it's probably more than just two employees, you probably got like factions going against each other.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be saying, okay, you know, and it's got to be tough to do this. Okay, we got to look at the entire leadership culture of your company. That's got to be difficult.
I became obsessed with developing a product, and I'm currently working on the process right now called conflict. It's a conflict resolution, and this is just the name right now, but a conflict resolution systems design package. Because a lot of what I get called in for, Mitch, and your viewers will understand this if they work in organizations, and I don't care whether the organization is McDonald's or Fortune 500 company, it doesn't matter. Actually, I'll make it even broader than that. It doesn't matter if the company is a two-person small business that's family owned or a multinational organization. Wherever you have two or more people, there will be conflict because there will be a difference around meaning and mattering and what goals are. So that's just going to happen, period, done, end of story. But a lot of what I get a call for are one-off workshops, or the 4-hour workshop on negotiation, or the 4-hour workshop on conflict resolution, or the 4-hour workshop on emotional intelligence, or even the 8-hour workshop on active listening. And one of the things that I tell clients with whom I work is, I can come in and do the one-off workshop for you. That's not a problem. I mean, heck, I talk about this in a very high-minded way, but my business feeds my family. So yes, I'll come and do the work. But the fact of the matter is that in 4 hours, 30 people in a room learning about active listening is not going to shift your culture. And when I tell HR managers that, one of the very first expressions they get is, "Oh, but we can't have that conversation." And what's even better is when I get the HR managers in those workshops and we start talking about the real transformative work that for me was first semester grad school stuff, but for them is rocket science. And I'm guiding them through this process. And they pull me aside during breaks. And I've had several HR managers in several organizations, not just in the Southern Tier, but in Central New York and in other places, pull me aside and say, "Listen, we love what you're doing here. But the fact of the matter is things won't change because the people in the C-suite aren't here."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, then you have to affect change where you're at. You can't worry about people above you. And really, quite frankly, the people below you think that you're above them anyway. So you've got to affect change in your one little silo. And so one of the things that I've been really working on, a project I've really been working on, is how to do outreach. And hopefully, this video will be part of that process. But how to do outreach to those executive and C-suite folks, because that's where the organizational culture is held. That's where organizational values and beliefs are held about conflict and what conflict is and is not. And even in the origin stories and the myths of how companies come about, which they tell each other and they splatter on the walls and they put on the letterhead, all those areas lead into how employees engage with or don't engage with conflict. Remember, there's only 3 ways: attack, avoid, or accommodate. That's it. And if everybody's doing that at differing levels in the organization, it's no wonder that I'm doing a one-off workshop for 4 hours and then leaving. I'm coming back next summer, and then the summer after that, and then the summer after that, and then the summer after that. And there's not any real cultural change in those spaces. So yes, in answer to your question, Mitch, it is very challenging to see that. And as a professional who knows what I know, to sort of see the potential to go past this, but not having the it's not really the advocacy, but sort of the not empowered. There you go. Not empowered to go past a certain paradigm. I think of Colin Powell during the first Gulf War. Norman Schwarzkopf wanted to go all the way to Baghdad, and Colin Powell did not. Colin Powell said, "Are you?"
Turns out to be right.
Well, I don't know about all that. Maybe if we gone all the way to Baghdad, we could have had a 10-year jump on all this. I don't know. No one knows. It didn't happen. We can't go back and relitigate history. It just didn't happen. So now we are where we are. But the fact of the matter is that decisions like that get made inside of organizations all the time. And the struggle is because we can't see more than 5 feet in front of our face. Even me, you can't see more than 5 feet in front of your face. When a conflict arises, the ripple effects of that, we don't really understand. We don't really get.
And that's a good point. Because we all end up at some point having certain types of conflict, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's out in the street, mm-hmm. whether it's in the household. Some kind. I mean, I like to tell folks, my wife and I have never had an argument in all the years we've been together, and we haven't. But that does not mean we have not maybe been a little disenchanted with each other every once in a while.
Right.
So we temper ourselves until we're ready to have the conversation, but we at least always have the conversation. Mm-hmm. And this is because of the mutual respect that we have for each other. And also, in general, as Michael Jackson said way back when, I'm a lover, not a fighter.
Well, I have to say, all conflict is interpersonal, regardless of the environment it happens in. So the conflict that happens between you and your wife, and it is conflict, but the conflict that happens between you and your wife, and the conflict that happens between 2 employees at General Mills, just pull a name out of a hat, at General Mills, it's interpersonal. We only have conflicts. I'll take a step back. we only have conversations with people that we have a personal relationship with. And we really only have conversations that matter, which is what you're talking about as a method of resolving conflict. We only have conversations that matter with real people that we are in relationship with. So I can't get resolution from General Mills other than through litigation if they have a dead rat in a bowl in a box of Cheerios that they ship out.
Well, you had to go there, didn't you?
Well, I can't, but this is it. Like, this is the method. Like, I can't go to the CEO of General Mills, show him the dead rat in the box and be like, get me resolution. I can't do that. As much as activists may want that to happen, Ralph Nader et al. May want that to happen, I can't do that because I don't have a personal relationship as Jesan Sorrells, consumer, with CEO of General Mills. I have a relationship, however, with the employee of General Mills who lives in my house. And that's who I'll show the dead rat in the box of Cheerios to and be like, what's going on with your company? So the only conflicts that matter are the ones that are personal, because the only conversations we can have that will lead to resolution and the ones that matter in that space are personal. So all conflict is interpersonal. You were asking me earlier, and I really didn't answer it. I sort of danced around it a little bit because I was thinking of the interpersonal line and how to bring this in. But you said, you know, there's a definition of conflict here and there, and we're really talking about, I said we're really talking about results, and we are, but I want to cycle back to that. Conflicts are interpersonal, period, done, end of story. They're all interpersonal, whether we have them with a brand online, or whether we have them with an employee, or whether we have them at home, or whether we have them with our kids or at church. We have a conflict with a person, not a brand, not an organization, but a person. So when Brandy doesn't bring...
okay, because you said it. Now I got to ask you about it. I got to put you on the line here.
Yeah.
Because what we have seen, and I'll say recently, and recently may be the last 3 to 5 years, is a lot more fussing about bad behavior or bad products or bad people on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. I mean, oh my goodness. My second most watched video is me fussing about Verizon trying to get my Fios in this house for 3 weeks. And folks have just clamored to that. And you see these things, and what happens sometimes is the press picks it up and they put it out there. Now, I'm not so sure that that's necessarily interpersonal. I know what you were saying about the other side. It's personal. I think it's definitely personal. If you've wronged me and I put something out there and I'm not looking to fuss at customer service, I'm not, because my history has told me I could call them up and I'm not going to get nowhere. But if I put it out there on Twitter, I can't believe how many resolutions I have gotten by putting something out on Twitter and fussing about it. And the next thing you know, they're contacting me. Oh, geez, I'm sorry. Can I help you? It's a new world.
Let's not confuse resolution with trying to move a customer service issue out of the public eye. Let's not confuse those two. Moving a customer service issue out of the public eye is really about PR and publicity and less about resolving a conflict. And by the way, the reason that Verizon's reaching out to you through those means is because, unlike the past where Verizon may have heard your phone call but may not have answered it, or may have put you on hold with elevator music for 20 minutes and relied on you to be frustrated and go away, we now have tools that allow immediacy to happen. And so we've confused immediacy with resolution. And immediacy is not resolution either. Immediacy is just short-term gain at the expense of a long-term cultural change. Now, who's got to do the cultural change? Well, in the example of Verizon that you brought up, and by the way, I used to know a guy, worked with a guy, and he's still in higher education. He's out in California now, who would write letters of complaint. He would handwrite letters of complaint to organizations and get all kinds of free stuff.
Oh, okay, I did that. I wrote the Sweet Tarts people once because I opened up a pack of Sweet Tarts and there were no red ones in it. And I wrote them about it, and they sent me a box of Sweet Tarts.
Oh, God.
Yes, I did.
See, I need to introduce you to my friend, then. You two can talk. The fact of the matter is, it used to be that you would have an angry letter to the editor, and it would show up in a newspaper, and the newspaper would go into the crank file. I love that line. I think it was from a movie. You know, we're going to go into the crank file and pull something. You know, and they would the mass at scale organization underneath the rules of the Industrial Revolution didn't really have to care about you, Mitch, as an individual, because you, Mitch, as an individual was part of the mass. And who gave a crap about the mass? That was the Industrial Revolution. We all live in a post-industrial society now, and we don't really understand how it works because we still have, our thinking hasn't changed. Our thinking is still Industrial Revolution thinking, which says there's a silo here, there's a certain way I walk through the path to the organization there, and then when I get there, there's a certain resolution in my brain that should happen. And if I don't get it, that's not just. Now, we see this in the way that individuals petition the government now for redress of grievances. And that's what protests are in activism. It's for redress of grievances, both perceived and otherwise, perceived and actual. We see this in the way that individuals interact with brands through social media, because now there are choices beyond just a telephone call or a written letter that can be ignored or lost in the post office. And by the way, if you look back at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, people complained then about the telephone not working and about the post office not arriving, the letters not arriving on time from the post office. So we haven't changed as people because our brains haven't changed in how we respond to external stimuli. It's just our technology and our context has shifted. And it's shifted towards being faster and more immediate. And so the human brain, because of the shortcuts that we make and dopamine and all kinds of other things that happen inside of our head when we do something that's pleasurable and we repeat it over and over again, we get that immediacy once we send out a tweet, or we make a YouTube video that generates 145,000 views or 1 million views, and then all of a sudden Verizon shows up, and it becomes a big public spectacular. And I did say spectacular, not spectacle, spectacular. And and we confuse that with resolution, or on the negative side, the darker side of that, we pursue litigation. So when there was chemicals in the drinking water, or when there's a rat in my Cheerios, I'm going to sue because I want, boom, this to happen, boom, right now, immediacy. The brand can give you immediacy because the brand operates at mass. But then we try to take those exact same methods and we try to apply them to interpersonal conflicts that aren't at scale. And that's when we get in trouble.
Okay. Now, conflict resolution, it seems that these days folks react a lot quicker and a lot more, I'll say violent, because I can't think of a different word to use right now. And it's the same kind of thing with leadership that I see. Mm-hmm. I see that it seems easier to work with a small group or 1 or 2 people here and there in getting them to change their mind and thus their culture than with the big group. And sometimes I say, maybe overall, we're just not a culture. And I don't mean just the United States. I mean the world is just not a culture that really wants to lend itself to leadership principles, because like Dr. Phil says, you got to be getting something positive out of it, whether it's negative or positive, you keep doing it. How do you feel about conflict resolution overall? Does it have a chance to get the world to change its mindset, or is it the best thing we can look forward to is making our little dent into what, the little bit that we can reach?
Couple of things there. I think we have to talk about words because language has meaning. And so resolution and management are 2 different things. I think, and this is why, and by the way, also engagement is something different. So this is why I'm a principal conflict engagement consultant. My goal through human services consulting and training and through the work that I do is to get people to engage effectively and engage with conflict in ways that will get them different outcomes and different results than what they've always gotten. Because when you, of course, engage in ways that continue the path that you're on, you keep getting what you've always gotten. And if you're satisfied with that, that's fine. But if you want something different, come see me. That's the first thing. So engagement is what I focus on. And engagement, I think we can get to. I absolutely think that that is attainable. I think we can get people to engage with conflict more effectively. And if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. Management of conflict, we know how to manage conflict. We really do. We know it innately. Management is just about practical skills. So management is about eye contact and active listening and engaging with empathy and not getting off your phone, putting your phone down. That's a practical skill set. And there are a lot of conflict coaches that do a lot of great work. I'm thinking of several right now who, in the leadership space, who are doing amazing and engaging things around that practical skill set of management that we all sort of take for granted. And then when we don't do it, we wonder why things slide off the rails. So the management piece is even easier to get to. I'm teaching my 5-year-old and my 10-year-old about management skills. Like, that's what I was doing before I got on the phone call. I'm teaching them about management. I'm not teaching them about the higher order, like emotional intelligence. I'm weaving some of those things in. But for a 5-year-old, no, it's management. Let's give her a practical skill. Now, you asked specifically about resolution. Do I think that we can ever get to resolution, or is the best that we can have the best that we have right now? No, I don't think we can get to resolution. And that's, and I don't think we should try. I think we should try for management and for engagement. Resolution is a higher order thing. And dare I say, and I know this is a leadership video and a leadership channel. And so this is where we're going to focus. And I don't know, maybe you've had somebody in this space who can talk about this intelligently. And I have my own opinions about it. Whether or not I could talk intelligently about it is another thing. But the resolution piece is a spiritual problem. The other piece of my degree is reconciliation and forgiveness. And so I did a lot of work in the transformative space of reconciliation. So my master's degree is in conflict resolution and reconciliation. Resolution and reconciliation are spiritual processes. And I'm not talking about religion. Religion is a man-made construct. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the deeper things that we don't like to talk about in organizations. The deeper things that when we're hard charging and chasing profits and revenues and looking at spreadsheets and numbers, we sort of forget about the things that really drive us. Why do you do the work that you do? Yeah, I'm sure it's for money, like to pay your bills and those kinds of things, but you could go pay your bills doing anything. Why this? And those deeper areas of meaning and mattering, those are at the core of resolution. That's the first answer to your question. I don't think we can get to resolution, but management and engagement, we can definitely get there. And we have too many people who are disengaged, who are engaged in avoidance. And avoidance is not a negative thing. Sometimes it's appropriate to avoid conflict, but know why you're avoiding before just picking that as a default. That's the first thing. Second thing, I'm sure you've heard of this, the idea of, or the concept of the mathematical concept of Dunbar's number, right?
I'm not saying yes or no.
Okay. All right. Well, all you out there, there'll be a link in the doodly-doo below the doodly-doo. Dunbar's number, the Wikipedia entry on that. Anyway, Dunbar's number basically says, and this is kind of sort of the principle that Facebook is built on, that, and there's a lot of other complicated things in it, but in essence, to distill it down, it says you can't know anybody. Once you know about 150 people, you're pretty much maxed out as a human being. And the strongest ties that you have are to the 5 or 10 people that are around you. And there's, like I said, there's a lot of other complicated things in it. I'm sure I'll have somebody email me about, no, you missed it. Yes, go ahead, email me, come at me, bro, it's fine. But Dunbar's number basically says 150 people, that's the top out. Well, the reason that is because we're tribal folks. And so what you were talking about deeply tribal. There's a book that I was reading, and I've gotten about halfway through, and I think I actually went back and forth a little bit with you on Twitter about it, on tribal leadership. Now the title, we can talk about that, but
yeah, that's where we went back and forth on.
Yeah, but and you know, I thought we were going to do a little dance about servant leadership too. We could do a little dance about that too.
You know what? Now, here's the thing. We're probably going to have to do another one because, you know, in an hour, I mean, really, the hour is almost up.
The hour's almost up.
There's so much to talk about. For instance, we're not going to get to talk about diversity, which is a big thing for both of us, which is really a big problem because people don't want to engage in that conversation. And that's one of the biggest conversations that needs to be done for a lot of different areas, not just race. I know folks will look at us and think I'm talking race. I'm talking about everything. So we're not going to be able to talk about that. We're not going to, you know, you're talking about the power of the word. You know, I don't like necessarily the word tribal. I don't like the servant leadership terminology. You know, there's terminology that I don't like. I acknowledge that it's there, but I also acknowledge who came up with the terminology. So,
right.
You know,
exactly. Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, we're going to have to probably do another one. Heck, maybe this is our blab topic. You know?
Maybe. Yeah, we got to get on blab.
So, but you know, and by the way, I didn't remember it was called Dunbar's number, but yes, I did know that concept. So,
yeah.
So I don't look so dumb anymore. I feel so much better now.
Well, Dunbar's number really goes to leaders, because leaders in organizations, particularly organizations that employ 1,000 to 5,000 people and or more, can't possibly know everybody. They just can't. So if you can't know everybody and you can't personally touch everybody, how do you lead and engage, quote unquote, everybody? Which is why the CEO, in the example that I brought up with the Cheerios, I can't possibly get resolution from that CEO. There are too many degrees of separation, to borrow from another, you know, Kevin Bacon thing. There are too many degrees of separation between me and that CEO. There's too much distance. The CEO doesn't care about me, doesn't know me, which is why movies like Crash, and you talk about the diversity piece, but movies like Crash really strike a chord with folks because it's about breaking through those barriers of separation and breaking through those numbers and really starting to see people past being widgets and moving them into human beings and seeing them as human beings with their own motivations, desires, dreams, purposes, focus, and on and on and on. Leadership in this area is and I often say this, it's not easy. Conflict engagement is not easy because it requires you to look at yourself. Conflict management is it looks easier, but it's actually less easy because it requires an understanding of yourself to realize what you can manage and what you can't. And knowing that distinction, and that's a distinction with a difference, makes all the difference in leadership.
Look at that. See, now that's a good thing to end on, because, you know, like I said, we could have talked for hours, and we did one time at oh my God, PF Chang's. We had a good conversation, and I had a good, nice lunch, whatever. And so, you know, we could do this all night long, but we're not going to. We're going to end it now. This has been wonderful. Hassan's got a lot of good stuff. I'm just going to say that. You can go to his website, read his blog. You can watch him on Twitter. We talk about some good stuff on Twitter. He's on LinkedIn. I don't know how much you're putting out on LinkedIn. I know I'm putting my stuff out there or anywhere else, but y'all need to check him out. And, you know, as a matter of fact, if you're in the local area, Syracuse area, he is the speaker at my Professional Consultants Association group meeting in November. So, you know, and if you see him in person, he does the finger thing a lot. I like to tell people he's got that Malcolm X finger thing. So this is your time to close it. You get to close the deal. Tell your name, tell your website, play yourself up good. You get the final word. There you go.
Beautiful. Well, first off, thank you, Mitch Mitchell, for having me on. I really appreciated this conversation, and you're exactly right. We could talk about this all night. It would be great to sit here and talk about the unwinding of diversity, the disintermediation that technology is causing that box in your house called television, entertainment, marketing, persuasion, convincing and converting people, and all the things, the quote-unquote soft skills that are really hard that prevent people from engaging or encourage people to engage. I'm fascinated by all this stuff, and you can watch me drip out my thoughts on the HSCT #communication blog at www.hsct hsconsultingandtraining.com/blog. I also have a podcast. It's a bi-monthly podcast, and I'm currently in season 2. It's called Earbud U. So get your knowledge on through your earbuds. You can also check that out on my website. Again, www.hsconsultingandtraining.com/earbud U. All of our season 1 episodes are up right now, and our season 2 episodes are dripping out even as we speak. Just released an episode with former mediator, business development consultant, and former lawyer out of Baltimore, Danya Zimmerman. She has a great redemptive story, and I encourage you all to go and listen to it. Finally, you can subscribe to my blog and to my semi-monthly email by going to my blog and signing up. I never sell your information. I never spam you. I send you 1 email a day with my blog post, and you can check it out, click on it, take a look at it. And it's a real easy way to sort of get engaged with me in all the areas that I'm thinking deeply about. And like I said, I'm dripping it out very, very slowly. I blog anywhere between 500 and 1,500 words a day. And I've been doing that for about 3 years now, and it's really been an awesome redemptive process. Finally, I do have a YouTube channel, which I haven't really done anything with. So, you can check me out there. All the things that I've subscribed to. And I will be doing something with that. I'm looking at launching a project next year. Finally, if you want me for a speaking engagement, if you're interested in having me come by to do some corporate training with your group and really moving your organization along in this leadership competency known as conflict engagement, you can check out my website and book me right there. So like I said, www.hsconsultingandtraining.com. Thank you very much, Mitch.
No problem. Talk about a close. There you go, folks. That's a close. And I'm going to end it now. I want to thank Jesan for letting me come and pick on him for a little bit here. And we've had a good time. I hope you've learned a few things. You heard that we're both kind of particular about words and stuff. And in my opinion, it's the words that we use that really help to not only define us, but really could be the difference between a conflict that ends well or doesn't end well. And that's where I'm going to end it. Y'all take care. It's been fun. Enjoy the video and see you later.
Have a good night.